Whoa, the almighty ruin temple has been updated, and with the update came out some new strategies. So the main change that happened in Seal is that the blessing, basically the buff blessing, has been added, the same one as raids have. So as you can see, Summoner gets 14,000 attack. We're gonna skip the defense and HP, those don't matter. We're mostly looking for the attack. So Summoner gets over 40k attack, and the monsters get just shy of 9,000 attack, as well as some mana regen. So I believe mana has been doubled to around 1.5 seconds per 1 mana. So yeah, let's look at how the meta has changed. Now that we have received these changes, here's the deal. Seal is still soloable with dots, like no problem with that. The problem is if you are playing solo, dots are no longer the best way to go about Seal. And even if you're not playing solo, if you're playing duo, trio, especially solo or duo, dots will not be the most efficient way to go about it. If you are playing in trio, you can mess around with dots because you just have more dots to stack. But yeah, mostly I'm gonna be focusing on solo runs for this one and how you can improve your runs with this buff. So first of all, now that we're not using dots, what sort of damage works the best? If you look at the rankings, you will notice that one of the units that is super OP for this raid is already popping up in the leaderboards. A bit too low still, but yeah, in rank 6, Perna is one of the best units for this. I would say it's probably the second best, and the reason for that is while it does have technically the highest damage of the two, the animation speed unfortunately lets him down a lot, because this is a very fast-paced dungeon. You only have a few seconds to dodge a skill, and Perna just sits there attacking with his second skill over and over again. So yeah, the main damage you are looking for in Seal is defense penetration damage. The reason for that is since you cannot apply defense break on the boss or any other debuff apart from dots, the raw damage has to essentially ignore defense. Otherwise, the damage you deal, no matter how high the multiplier is, the defense from the boss will simply be too high for you to do any significant damage. There are a few units or other ways to ignore defense, so Perna will probably be the one that most people will have. And as you can see, if the target is immune to CC effect, which the boss is, all of his attacks, basically the second skill, will ignore 50% of the defense. It will not apply damage taken up, it will not apply unrecoverable, however it will proc up to 2 times because the boss is immune to CC again. And overall for 4 mana you are looking at just a bit over 2000% multiplier with that 50% ignore defense, right? And his ultimate, very similar, 50% defense penetration, and it does 1357% multiplier. It's a bit worse overall than the second skill because this cannot proc multiple times, so it is still decent damage. However, let me bring your attention to the best unit for this, and that is the Fire Polar Queen Brandia. So if you look at her second skill, it actually has a very similar thing with defense penetration 50% if the boss, or rather if the enemy you're attacking is a boss, and also if she's attacking a boss, her damage will be boosted by 30%. This is not one of those debuffs, this is just straight up damage boost. The problem with that is if you look at the multiplier and compare it to Perna, 773%, we can add up another 30%, which will put her above like 1000, but it is not even close to the Perna's over 2000 that she goes from one skill, right? Unless, here is the condition under which you use Brandia. You must have one of the blue mage artifacts called Weakness Exploit. This is the only artifact which allows her to outshine Perna in that dungeon. As you can see here, penetrates the target's defense by 30% when attacking enemies under a dot. The seal can only deceive dots as the only harmful effects. So this skill, combined with the 50% penetration on that second skill, will actually do very similar damage to what 3 hits of the perna's skill 2 will do. However, since this is a single hit, the animation will be much faster. You will be able to cycle mana much faster. And yeah, on top of that, the ultimate. This is way better ultimate than perna, so multiplier is close to 2000. It has double the damage if you're hitting a boss, and it also has 60% penetration. So 60%, couple that with another 30% from the artifacts. And yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna spoil it. I'm gonna show you the run that I got the high score with. My high score is currently 55 seconds and it's rank 1 on the server. So yeah, enjoy, and I'll talk about the comps a little bit in just a second. So yeah, as you can see, I'm gonna actually comment over this. First of all, you will need a correct summoner for this. So if you are a cleave user, Wind Cleave will be the summoner that you have to use, because it has a dot on the second skill, and his third skill actually boosts all of your team's damage by 30%. So Wind Cleave is like the only summoner that you can use. For Soletas, I believe the Wind one is pretty similar if you have the upgraded level 72nd skill. By the way, look at this ultimate. Yes, it one-shot the boss from 25% as long as there is a dot. And yes, the run is 55 seconds. So for the Soleta, you will essentially need to use the Wind one as well, because it will apply dots with the second skill, and it will apply the same damage up with the third skill. Unfortunately, that one is only single target, but in most cases you will be running only one damage dealer in these comps. And for other summoners, I believe for Orbia, she doesn't really have one that buffs mobs, so I would say Fire will probably be the best, since that will apply consistent damage over time at least, as well as Burn actually increases your damage by a tiny bit. And for Kina, I don't even know, probably the Fire one, right? The cooldown cycling. But yeah, let's look at other monsters that you can use with this. Okay, so we already figured out that one of the monsters, as long as you have it, should be either the Perna or the Brandia, and that will be your main damage dealer essentially. For other picks, naturally you will need an attack buffer. So if you are a Kina, you will have attack buff from your second skill of the fire element if you are running it. If you are any other summoner, you will unfortunately need an attack buff from a monster. So I personally use Huaki because that's what I had built at the time. I mostly only needed it for attack buff. However, if your runes are a little bit worse quality, there is another unit that you can consider using, which is Seek, the Fire Hellhound. He is a 3-star, I believe, and he has a skill 2, which does a bit of a better buff. It does not heal like Huaki. However, it provides the same duration for the same cost of attack up, and on top of that, it also provides you critical rate up. So if you're struggling with runes, if you're missing critical damage, or rather critical rate, in order to hit that 100%, he will be an amazing option for it. And then there is another option that you can use for attack buff that provides a little bit more than just attack buff. So that is Meron, the Water Mystic Witch. She is a nat 4. So for the same cost, she will provide you 20 seconds of level 2 attack up this time actually, instead of level 1. And on top of that, it will allow you to do additional chip damage with that level 2 attack speed up. Especially this should help if you're someone who is a Soleta, because your Soleta sort of even regens mana from basic attacks, I believe. So yeah, you basically put any attack buffer. If you are struggling with dodging, for example, I would recommend putting an attack buff with a heal, something like a not Bastard Huaki. Bastard also works since she has a shield, she will absorb a lot of the damage, but essentially choose any attack buffer that you have or prefer to use. And then for the third unit. Now the third unit will have quite a few options, and it will mostly depend on what you are missing. For example, if you want to refer to Myron, for me, I was okay with dodging abilities since I don't really get hit a lot and I try to dodge most of them. Healing is something that isn't required too much for me. Movement speed is something that is not required too much for me. So if you are having trouble dodging, I would recommend putting either of the movement speed buffers. So Remy will give you level 3 movement speed, but Bernard will give you level 2 plus attack speed, which is a bit more of an offensive option. So you can use one of those. If you are okay with dodging, you can use any other units such as, for example, perna. You can actually combo both of them. I've tried it out. For me, the run using this combo, we can replace it with Joaquin just to show you my team. With this combo, I actually got, I think it was around 1 minute 5 seconds, so it's still very good because perna is able to use that second skill quite peacefully without me spamming that ability a lot. While I spam Brandia's ability, he just simply uses his second skill occasionally and will do a little bit of that defense penetration damage as well. Now, if you wanna cycle your Brandia or perna a bit more, but for this guy, I would recommend using Brandia. He will not work too well with perna because perna will simply won't be able to keep up the animation speed with the amount of mana you are getting. You can use Shimite. You might have him built for something like Infinite Raid or even PvP, but if you look at his second skill, this is on 24-second cooldown, and each time he hits the boss, he will actually give you level 2 mana, or is it level 1? It's a double hit, so it should give you level 2 mana regen. So the damage he does is not super amazing. He doesn't have defense penetration unless you also put weakness exploit on him, so in that case he will have a minimal 30% defense penetration and will do a little bit of chip damage, but then again, don't bother if you are really struggling with artifacts. The damage he will do compared to Brandia or perna is really just negligible. But with this one, since you are getting level 1 mana regen speed up, essentially your mana will be cycling 1.5 times faster, which will be a little bit below 1 mana, or rather 1 mana less than 1 second for regen time, right? I can't speak English today after 3 hours of farming Bulldog, but yeah. This is another option, and with this guy I did get the best run in my attempts so far. And of course, naturally, if you're really struggling with doing damage with dodging, you can go even for another healer. Brandia by herself will do a lot of damage as long as you give her time to spam those skills. Another option you can try using is Verde Heal. He will be doing similar thing to the Wind Sylph, however, he takes a little bit of time to charge up, but once charged up, you will be able to spam Brandia's skill 2 or just 1 mana, and you will be able to spam it pretty much infinitely. So once he has the ultimate, you are pretty much guaranteed to get a kill on the boss within a few seconds. Now, unfortunately, if you do not have neither the Brandia or the Fire... Why is Fire Phoenix not here? He clearly has defense penetration. Whatever, but basically if you don't have Fire Phoenix perna or the Brandia, there are a few other options you can try to use. For example, Karambit is one of the more budget options. He has a little bit of defense penetration on his basic attack, but again, this is not as consistent because first of all it's RNG, second of all the defense penetration he has is a little bit lower. There are a few other units such as like Kali, which does have defense, ignore hair, and it can also buff up your attack. So options are there, but again they will be a little bit worse than Brandia or perna. One shout out I want to give though is Bulldozer. So if you look at this skill, first of all, it is 60% penetration, which is one of the highest on a regular skill, if not the highest actually. And also, if you look at the multipliers on this skill are really big as well. So this is a double hit, and it only costs 3 mana compared to 4 mana for the other ones. And if you look at the total multiplier, 265 plus another 400, that's let's say just a bit over 650% total. Double hit, which will means you double the damage, and that is pretty much 1300 multiplier on a nat 3 unit. The problem with nat 3s is their stats will be a little bit lower, but this is also a budget option. You can even combine it with more of a defense buffer than an attack buffer because his scaling is more prevalent on defense, and with that you can maybe even try to use a unit like Windy, which will boost your crit damage and defense up. So with this you will be able to spam Bulldozer's skill 2 instead of Brandia's or perna's skill 2. This is very budget, but hopefully you do have either a perna or a Brandia, as those will allow you to get the most consistent runs. And yeah, Once you go through those runs, you can expect records like this. As you can see, these are the stats of the units that I've used. McLeave, nothing special. Yeah, the stats, don't trust the stats. McLeave does not have 20k attack. The stats are because of the boosted seal runs, right, in Solar. So they added 14k attack onto this one. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Have fun farming, and especially if you are getting prepared for the mythic gear, you will want to farm these to use for the succession method, which I've covered a few weeks earlier. And yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna have to get done with my 39 entries this week, and yeah, peace.